very important question. Who is over 60 years old here? Okay, so you'll see that I'm going to prove you that you are going to be.
You didn't admit you were over 60 either.
I'm ageless. Yeah. So I'm going to prove you that you get better with age. Equipment as well. Okay. Now, would you get the duct tape for this guy? Okay. As Sam can confirm, and many other people know, I have a tendency of taking credit for other people's work. The work was done by Tor, who unfortunately could not be here, and because he has family duties, it's the Easter week for his schools, kids in the school. So I'm here to present his work, basically. Okay, I'm not going to bother you with the resumes and that kind of nonsense. Okay, well, you can read that yourself later because this will be posted. But let's going to talk about what is the difference between the traditional belief between industrial machines and medical equipment, and what this may have to do with our maintenance strategies. Okay, so we are going to talk about methodology, what we did, the results we obtained for imaging, biomed, and some specific equipment types, and then discuss some conclusions. Okay, the traditional view is the so-called bathtub approach to aging, early failures, infant mortality, etc. The bathtub is the blue one shown at the top here. Okay, that's the bathtub, which is a combination of infant mortality, early failures versus the effect of aging, and in the middle there's a constant random failure. Okay, this is well known in the industrial domain, industrial maintenance, and has been around for many years and is used extensively in industrial machines maintenance. So the question is, do you agree or don't agree? I'm going to ask you guys to vote for a list of equipment, and Connor will take notes here. Whoever wins the contest, Sam is going to buy him or her a dinner. Right, Sam? You promised.
Another empty promise.
Okay, so here is a brief attempt to compare industrial equipment, what I call production machines, manufacturing typically, versus medical equipment. And you'll see that they are not exactly comparable in many aspects. Okay, so there is a question whether the so-called bathtub effect is real. Can we rely on it to make our maintenance strategies? Because ultimately we need to understand the so-called population that we treat, we take care of, and how this will come out in terms of patient safety, clinical outcomes, etc. Okay. For those who have not read some of my articles and books and stuff like that, I have a tendency of calling what we do is an evidence-based maintenance first, as an analogy to evidence-based medicine, because the only real difference between us and the clinicians, doctors, is that we have a non-human being as a patient. They have a human being as a patient. Of course, it's a whole lot more challenging because whoever designed the human being forgot to leave the blueprints around. Okay, and the persons who designed medical equipment unfortunately often refuse to give us a blueprint, but at least we can have some guess how they were designed, how they function. Okay, so I'm not going to read this in great detail because you can read probably faster than me. So if equipment age has a significant effect, then we have to think about our management of equipment, not just maintenance strategy, but also inventory and replacement retirement planning. Some of you are probably very familiar with something called life expectancy. There are organizations that publish a list. Consultants go around to hospitals, say you need to replace the equipment because it has reached its useful end of useful life, etc., etc. The question is that really accurate? Is really reliable? Okay, so one of them is the best known, probably is the American Hospital Association has a list. Okay, and this list is called expected depreciation, estimated useful lives. And for depreciable hospital assets, they don't consider little things. For example, the finger probe type of pulse oximeter thing, that's not depreciable. That's so low cost, they don't consider that a financial asset. But anything that is something like $1,000 at least, maybe $5,000 more, will be considered depreciable asset, and then they use this. And this is widely used. And you will see that I will be showing red arrows in the slides coming up and comparing what we got in terms of results versus what they recommend. Okay. We have currently over 600,000 pieces of equipment, but some of them we don't really have comprehensive data. So we are really analyzing only about a little over 500,000. And we have been in business for over 25 years, so we have quite a bit of data going back. Okay. And however, we do have some challenges. About only 87% of this data we've deemed reliable enough to be analyzed. The reason being that some of them don't have the age of that piece of equipment. Okay, we don't know. We took over the hospital from the previous either vendor or in-house group, and they never recorded properly the date of acquisition or date of the piece of equipment. Sometimes you would say, okay, you can go back to the label of the equipment and look up, but that is a very laborious process when you have, a very large amount. So we did not do that ourselves. So, and age, we have to caution you is we compare the equipment age when we manage, and it's not the number of pieces of equipment that we manage at that particular time. In other words, we count for, let's say, year 10. Year 10 is how many pieces of equipment we have been managing at that time with age 10. Okay, that does not mean that all those pieces of equipment are still there or maybe not there anymore, etc., etc. So, but at age 10, those are the number of pieces of equipment in particular groups that we managed. So to give you a better idea how these two compare, if we took all equipment types, okay, equipment inventory, equipment, they are roughly proportional, related. However, the scales are very different. In other words, the number of a piece of equipment that what we call managed that I'm going to be showing you is this smooth curve here. It's actually 10 times more than the number of equipment in inventory, because equipment come and go, get retired, replaced, etc. Right? So, but they are correlated to some extent, which is what you expect. All the equipment get washed out, disposed, etc. Okay, but bear in mind that we are not talking about the current inventory. And this happens not only for biomedical equipment, but for diagnostic imaging equipment as well. Of course, the predominant group here is biomedical equipment, and this is a much smaller number, but still have the similar tendency. Okay. Okay. So how did we try to evaluate reliability? We look into the number of both PMs, or PM we call planned maintenance, not necessarily preventive maintenance, and corrective maintenance work orders, and in each equipment age when was managed, okay, and divided by the number of equipment that was managed at that time to have a relative number for us to understand the number of PMs and number of CMs were performed during that year. And if it's fractional, we will give that fractional. A piece of equipment may have been retired at 9.5 years instead of exactly 10 years, so we will give a fractional number. And then we took a look at different equipment types as well, okay? And a typical imaging, biomed, etc. And there are some outliers. There are issues when we have very few pieces of equipment, as you know from statistics. It doesn't make any sense for you to try to compute a mean standard deviation when we have something like less than 30 pieces of data there, okay? Okay, so give you a gross idea. All equipments that we seen, we plotted the number of CMs red and the number of PMs green, okay? And the number of equipment managed is this dark red here. Should be black actually, but it's coming out as maroon. So this is everything, okay? And gives, if you look at this as a whoa, equipment can be used for as much as maybe almost 20 years, and you don't see a significant variation in the number of correctives. So equipment seems to be quite reliable. So why are we replacing equipment so soon? And also, it's somewhat unclear whether the PMs actually reduce the number of repairs or not. But the problem here is that this is a little bit misleading because we are bundling a whole ton of stuff here. Okay, so the details is what we are going to look into and see what's going to happen. Imaging equipment is a little bit different. We see a ramp up of the number of repairs in the first 10 years, okay, compared to when we say our equipment. So there is something more to be looked at for imaging equipment, diagnostic imaging equipment, and we'll see some of them later on. Okay, and also, by the way, most of you folks know the imaging equipment require more corrective maintenance than biomed equipment. That's nothing really surprising here. Okay, all right. Biomed equipment, if you take out the diagnostic imaging, then it's even flatter than before, okay? Because some of that bump that you saw here was actually due to diagnostic imaging equipment, okay? All right. So here is the list that I'm going to present you, and I would like to ask you to raise your hand. You can raise multiple times, and I'm not going to read the whole list because CONT is going to kill me if I ask him to write down everything here. So I picked 5 pieces of equipment: CT scanner, diagnostic ultrasound for the cardiac type, not the general one, infusion pump, the modular infusion pump that you see very often today, CO2 lasers, and ventilators that are equipped with compressors. Okay, and I would like to ask you to vote which ones you think there is an effect of age. Raise your hand for CT scanners. Hey, come on, guys. You're not going to be penalized for this. 1, 2, 2 votes. Oh, all right. Diagnostic ultrasound cardiac. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Infusion pumps, modular infusion pumps. Wow. A lot. Wow. Infusion pumps cannot age. Do not age well. Oh. CO2 lasers. 1, 2, who gives more? Only 2. ventilators with compressors, a lot. Okay, let's see whether you people are agreeable with the data. We divided into 3 groups. The ones that we claimed to have clear wear out pattern. Now, there is a clear increase of CMs during that period of time. Okay, and there is also a gray zone that we draw on each one of these data plots, because those are the cases when we fell under 30 number of units per year for that age bracket. CT scanners, as you can see, the number of CMs increase with time. Don't worry too much about the first year. The first year, there is a mixture of warranty, repair, and it's a very confusing situation, okay? And so quite often it's also fractional information. So, but CT scanner clearly rises the number of repairs up to 15 years, and even perhaps beyond a little bit. Whereas the useful life recommended by American Hospital Association is only 5 years. But we clearly see a lot of CTs used well over 10 years. Okay. Likewise, MRI, diagnostic ultrasound, general purpose, hemodialysis. And none of this should be surprising, because very often they involve heavy weights that have to move around, chemicals, high energy, okay, high power. So a lot of these things you would say intuitively, yeah, I would agree that there is something. Now comes to the infusion pumps. You guys guessed correctly. Infusion pumps, modern infusion pumps has a remarkable rise of number of repairs over the years. Is this really age issue, or is it something else going on here? Okay, I mean, come on, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to see, wait a minute, 5 years, 5 years is nothing. The recommendation from AHA to replace infusion pumps is 10 years. So what we are seeing here, even syringe pumps, single channel infusion pumps, those standalone, non-modular ones, multi-channel infusion pumps, they all exhibit this kind of behavior. Why is this the case? All right, beds, stretchers, telemetry transmitters, waste management system, those famous Neptunes, again showing rises. And by the way, the PMs are actually fairly flat in most cases, sorry. The PMs are fairly flat in most cases. Sometimes you see a little bit of rise of PMs because, remember, we go back 20 some years, 30 years here. Previously, Joint Commission was not demanding 100% PM completion rate. So actually you will see that some of the PMs actually got increased for more recent ages, not because they needed, but because we were mandated to do it, okay? And when we have larger numbers, these gray zones then become smaller, but when we have small numbers, the gray zones are bigger. Okay, there are some that we say unclear because the numbers are not very clear, and it's not exactly rising or coming down or flat. So say, okay, these ones we need more data to understand a little better what's going on here. But there are ones that we really claim that there is no wear out of any type that we can see. For example, defibrillators, very flat, and up to something like 20 years. We see defibrillators being used up to 20 years, although AHA says you need to replace every 5 years. Okay, electrosurgical unit, neonatal incubators, telemetry monitoring system, the receiver side, not the patient carrying side, transmitters. Okay, ventilators without compressor and with compressor. See, remarkably, there's no such a dramatic difference. Okay. Anesthesia machine, you say, wow, wait, that has a mechanical or pneumatic pieces they're running. Nope, nothing dramatic here. Multi-parameter monitoring system, well, you expected that because that's a pure solid state thing. Okay, not like the old days that we may have vacuum tubes, etc. Again, lasers, Homian lasers, CO2 lasers, hypothermia, hypo and hyperthermia, and feeding pumps. See that? And almost every single time we see the hospitals actually using the equipment a whole lot more than what is recommended by AHA. So you can go out and tell your bosses that, hey, we are helping you guys to extend the useful life of the equipment, and we should be valued for that service we provide to you, because otherwise you'll be spending a lot of capital money replacing equipment unnecessarily. Okay. Now, ultrasound. We have cardiac, we have the point of care ultrasound, those are the smaller portable units. And then we have a general purpose diagnostic ultrasound. This one is the black sheep here that shows a little more inclination of the rise of the corrective maintenance. We don't know exactly why, okay, but that seems to be the case. But nonetheless, still we are seeing hospitals using these devices a whole lot longer than any recommendation. So the first thing that we decided to look at is that, how about looking at weight and power, as I mentioned before? These things must have some bearings. So we individually made a guess about weight and power voltages, and then whether we found clear wear out or not. And it turned out that when we put the list here, we have a very confusing picture. Every time we have a heavy, high, not all the time we have yeses, sometimes yes, sometimes no, and then see, it's all over the place. So there's something fishy about this traditional concept of weight and power being the predominant factors. Okay, so what is contributing to the deterioration of equipment with age? Anyone guess? Yeah, but if you have operator problems in a single hospital, it's difficult to differentiate. But when you have 50, 100 hospitals, the operators cannot be that dramatically different. There's an average out there. It's the statistics law of large numbers there, and things get averaged out. But there's an effect. There's no question about it. Other gases. Sorry? Number of utilization, correct? Yes, there is a factor that we don't have data, unfortunately, to support. Nowadays, a lot of equipment are network. You could determine the utilization, but that information is not readily available for the older equipment. And even for the newer pieces of equipment, it's very tough to get that data out. The fact that it's connected to the network does not necessarily mean it's being used, right? So an infusion pump, it's connecting to the, but when it started, when it stopped, you need to know. And sometimes the stoppage is because the patient is being cleaned or something, or somebody's exchanging drugs there, whatever you. So it's a little bit, but it's definitely a factor that we would like to see. What other factors, you guys? Yes, sir. Yes, we thought about that, and since I could not find anyone who would volunteer to protect me with guns. I don't dare to. I don't think you have a license to carry in California. Here in Texas, you may get away with that. Some manufacturers may not be very happy with the outcomes, say, but yes, there is a likely a contributing factor, but contributing factor is not necessarily the name of the manufacturer. It's maybe, if you go back for the devices made by the same manufacturer, same brand over the years, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, things have changed. Okay, well, they changed ownership also, but one of the classical examples is the vital signs monitor. The vital signs monitor of the old days, it's like a tank. You can drop it, you can kick it, it will never fail. Nowadays, you better don't look too hard at that thing because it's going to break. Okay. Okay. So we, as suggested, we're looking to utilization. And I don't have a better word for this term here. As you guys know, I'm a Brazilian Chinese faking to be an American here. Okay. So I call that sturdiness, or maybe it should be called robustness. What I'm trying to say is how well built is that device? Anyone has a better term for it? It's like you're buying a car, okay? In the old days, you probably would not buy a Toyota 45, 50 years ago, or 20 years ago, you probably not buy a Hyundai. But today, I don't think you will hesitate to buy a Toyota or Hyundai, okay? So, but today you probably still will not buy a Hugo, okay? A Hugo, yeah, I'm not sure even it exists anymore. But I think how well built is a question, and it does relate to what Ari was saying. Unfortunately, as I said, we have not go down deep to the level of brands and models, but there is a suspicion that there is something going on there. And also, it seems that this is not necessarily related to a single manufacturer or brand of equipment. For example, Connor has a lot of experience with infusion pumps here. What has happened to infusion pumps in the last 15 years? Yeah, but besides that, yeah, but since the introduction of the yes, sir. Yeah, but being connected to a network does not necessarily mean that it's going to break more often, right? Maybe. And if you are saying network because a connector is always breaking because people are connecting, disconnecting, that could be the case, but most of the network now are wireless, so should not have a direct impact. But what I personally think that is happening, and you guys are welcome to dispute, is that manufacturers, since the introduction of the so-called smart pumps, have decided to go to the strategy that is known for the younger folks here, inkjet printer model. And for the old folks like Sam here, is the Gillette model. In other words, the money, follow the money. Where's the money coming from? In the old days, infusion pump, really old days, okay, are those gravity-fed infusion pumps. You have a standard set that fits any brand and model of infusion pump. You have a roller pump, I think they're pump the liquid, etc. And the manufacturer design a good pump to be sold and to be used for many years. After the so-called smart pump came out, the attention has been switched to selling the infusion set and not the infusion pump. They will even give you the infusion pump for free if you buy the sets and the drugs and the solutions, right? So isn't this similar to the inkjet model of the printer? You buy a printer for less than $100, but you pay $200-300 per year for the cartridges. And this goes back to Gillette, who invented the disposable cartridges for shaving, right? And that's what we are seeing. So these pumps are breaking left and right. I don't, again, have a better word. Tell me if you guys can think of something better than sturdiness, but this is a subjective judgment of robustness or sturdiness of devices that we did. And this is obviously very crude and subjective. We just said high, medium, low, and utilization high, medium, low, depending on device. Okay, and obviously it's not fair sometimes to bundle things. For example, defibrillators that you have in the med-surg wards are not used as often as the defibrillators that you use in the emergency wards, okay, or ambulances. Okay, but they could be the same brand and model, but hey, the utilization rate is, yes, sir.
Did you see or did you think of the idea that the higher mobility the item is, more likely it is to fail? And that's typically where we see most of the damage is being moved from place to place and drop. Those are the kinds of things that I would think would be a higher factor for some of those things. The more it's moved around the facility.
Yes, we understand that. Unfortunately, we don't have in the old days the data in the work order that is discriminated well. For example, someone said this infusion pump is broken, fix it, right? Now, wait a minute. What happened to this infusion pump? Somebody dropped it on the floor when they were trying to clean it or taking out of the IV pole, or it broke by itself because of some internal motor burnout or something like that. Okay, so that's where the what I call failure cause code, although Amy does not seem to like the word cause, they call that failure code. I think failure code for me is something different. Failure is, oh, the power supply of that thing burned. Okay, yeah, but what caused the power supply to go? Oh, it was a lightning in the against the building. Oh, that's a different story than the power supply burned by itself. Okay, so we need to identify the causes. If we had the causes, we could identify use-related accidents and factors versus the one that we call unpreventable failures that would occur by nature. There's nothing you can do about it, but you may be in the future able to recommend a better replacement of equipment, a better brand, a better, more robust, more sturdy piece of equipment. But otherwise, if you don't know the cause, you have to, we lump everything in here because that's all we got at the moment. Going into the future, we are identifying the cause of failure in our work orders so we can really understand, oh, yeah, the problem is not with the pulse oximeter. The problem with it is the probe that was used that broke, and because the procurement department decided to buy the cheapest available probe, and then now we have a lot of complaints against the pulse oximeter, but the problem is the accessory is not the pump, okay? The monitor. Anyway, so we decided to do this analysis, and you can see there is a little better correlation when you have high robustness, medium utilization, or low utilization. You tend to have a no wear out, whereas the wear out is more likely to be detected when you have high utilization and the equipment is not so well built. So intuitively, I think that makes some sense because, hey, so now this means that you have some information that's useful, actionable to provide to the hospital leadership. Say, look, if you want more reliable equipment, less frequent replacement, you need to look at this kind of parameters, then you can decide how to proceed. Okay. Sorry?
Durability is the word you're looking for, because I think the manufacturing failed to your point, you start to follow money. If they make the parts, the front bezel on a computer phone, they make it cheap plastic, well, that's just gonna break as soon as it is before, so it's not as durable. So they charge you more for the part. So I think durability may be a word.
Yeah, I thought about that word, but I'm a little concerned. Durability is, in my mind, not related to the construction process. Durability is the consequence of the robustness of, so I'm still struggling to find. Somebody has a, okay. Yeah, but it does, the reliability is a composition of the sturdiness of the device and also the utilization and training of the users, etc. So the reliability is the more global aspect than just individual pieces. Okay. Anyway, so this is comparison of the number of years that AHA suggested, and I'm not going to bother you reading this little eye chart here. Okay, so as I mentioned before, weight and power is not enough. Utilization, sturdiness are probably more influential. Actually, we are playing around with some algorithms that we could assign to different things and find ways to predict things. And as I said before, we did not identify the causes previously, so we don't know what the difference between natural wear out and abnormal wear out. Okay, and also we assume equipment have the same utilization as the case of defibrillators that I mentioned before. So we are missing quite a few important details. The directionally correct, but specific recommendations may be wrong. And also, there are many confounding factors that can contribute to this thing. Some of you probably have this same experience that we have had, is that older equipment sometimes are used as backups. They are not so often used. They're put into the warehouse or storage room, etc., and only called upon when you have a surge of patients there. So they don't seem to break down that often, but then they are not being attempted to be used, and therefore they don't know that it's broken. So it's a little bit paradoxical here. You know, I wish I could say the older I am, I have a better health. Well, I'm not sure that's totally true. Okay, although Sam keeps reminding me that it's never true, right? Okay, and some also old equipment are used solely by a few users. There are some physician preference cases out there. Somebody just want that thing, and that thing has been there for 20 years, and the guy is not retiring. He said, I want this and keep it, and there's nothing you can do about it. Okay, so there are some unique cases out there. Okay, and also there's another confounding factor is that in the old days, the staff was allowed to perform small repairs while performing PMs. Now we have killed that. You have to open a corrective work order every time you find a problem during PM, and then so we can record that. So there are some incomplete information out there in terms of corrective maintenance. Okay, and you probably have similar challenges there. Okay, and as I mentioned before, higher PM rates for younger equipment simply because we were told to do more PMs than really necessary, I would guess. And also sometimes equipment is replaced when a single catastrophic event happens and costs more than maybe 30–50% of the fair market value, then say, hey, just dispose it and don't fix it. So the number of equipment at that old age, at the tail end, sometimes becomes quite questionable what is really happening there, and we don't have a clear indication. And also, the old question whether PM really reduce CMs, we don't know from this data. We have some other data, but if you don't do PMs, you could increase, but there is not concrete enough data here until we really compare one set of equipment with PM, the other set without PMs, to be a little more conclusive. We have done that, but this is not the set we have. So until we have that, I think we have to do what the government told us to do, okay? But it's very clear that there are some devices that really does not matter how much PM you do, the failure rate is, in terms of CMs, is fairly flat. So I don't know why the government is mandating us to do the PMs as recommended by manufacturers for lasers and radiologic imaging equipment. Okay. Those things really have nothing to do with anything that we have found in terms of data. But, you know, if you don't want to argue with the City Hall, that's what you have to do. For replacement planning, as I mentioned before, this is important. Okay, replacement is not age. Okay, equipment has to do with safety, reliability, supportability, and also clinical impact. These are the elements that you really need to consider. And the AHA book actually says that it is only a guide. Okay, actually, I happened to know one of the folks that originated that list, and I beg your pardon here, the indulgence. I'm not going to review the name of the person, but that list was done on a bar on a napkin after some drinks, and that was something like 30–40 years ago. And so don't worry too much about it. So bottom line is that most equipment, and you see that every day in your lives, that it's well beyond the estimated lives. Okay, so the maintenance strategy, I would suggest that you have two groups, one with clear wear out and the other one without clear wear out pattern. Here you have to identify and look for equipment type with this characteristic: medium to high utilization, low sturdiness, heavy weight, high power. These two are in red because they are more important than these two others. And then the PMs, the real PMs, replacing parts that is predictable and preventable, then you should replace the parts. And these are the ones that deserve the real PMs. Otherwise, you are just inspecting for hidden failures. And then the ones that don't have a clear wear out, they are good candidates for AEM, including run to failure, because you are going to see them one way or another when they come in for repairs. Okay. And by the way, this is not anything new for some of the younger folks here. Arif decided to hide himself there. You may remember there was a guy with the last name of Bob, with the name of Bob Stiefel, and at Johns Hopkins University Hospital, which is not exactly a unknown hospital in the United States. Some almost 25 years or more ago, he challenged the Joint Commission and said, I'm not going to put infusion pump on regular PM schedule. Joint Commission was not happy, but they could not find any reason, rules, or failures or patient safety issues to cite him for that. So he got away with it for many, many years, just run infusion pumps to failure. Okay, I think I am getting, well, infant mortality is something we rarely see. Replacement planning is, we discussed before. Okay, and also be a little careful, as was mentioned here. One hospital is not necessarily identical to another, right? So we can give you some hints to look for things, but it's a directionally correct, maybe recommendation, but you need to look at your particular hospital situation or particular system situation and decide what's the right situation there, because you may have very different utilization, and also you may have very different brands and models of equipment in your inventory there. Okay, so here is the contact information. Hopefully I saved enough time for you to ask questions, comments. Sorry?